Okay, here we are. This is our first
Family room.
family room
Yeah.
for our parent care series
Yeah.
called My Mom and Dad Are Old.
Yeah.
My parents are old.
Yeah. Yeah.
What the hell do I do now?
What the hell do I do now? Yeah. It seems like almost everybody that I'm talking to right now is going through this same journey. And we've had some really, really good questions come in from people that we'll get into in a little bit. But
And before we jump in, we got to say, if you're live right now on Facebook or YouTube, then we've got a comment thread going. Please be part of the conversation. We've got a couple of videos to play for you, but we've got a lot of conversation to do. And just please jump in anytime you'd like to, and we'll respond to it. And not just
Absolutely.
questions, but ideas, right?
Yeah,
Experiences that
and
you've had.
especially also if
Yeah.
you've been through some of the things that we're going to be talking about, we'd love your feedback. We'd love to know what your personal stories were like and
Right.
what you went through. And, so yeah, this is really an opportunity for some open dialogue and for some resource sharing, which is kind of why we created this whole platform in the first place.
We should say this one is sponsored by MobileHelp.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay, and there's a link for MobileHelp, and it's in the comment threads.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And I should just tell you too that, we are really grateful to be sponsored by MobileHelp. It was the medical alert system that I chose for my mom. And it's been gigantically helpful. She's out of state. I'm not there. I'm not in a place where I can check in on her on a regular basis. And just knowing that, she's safe and I don't get that 2:00 in the morning phone call is really a big deal for me. So that's what we felt really, really good about coming on board with them.
There you go. So you had something you wanted to.
Yeah, what I wanted to do was, we're talking about caring for aging parents, and the kind of the overarching topic that people have been throwing at us is the idea of, of how to know when they need help.
Mhm.
And we talked a lot about kind of our 3 steps for that, which is something we're going to have in a course that we're putting together. So I'll let you talk about the 3 steps that we put together.
Well, it's actually something we have in the video. Should we play the video right away?
We can do that. Yes, we can.
Okay, let me see if I can do this right, and we'll see what happens.
Mhm.
All right, the first thing is, how do you know when mom and dad even need help? What are the triggers? What are the signs you should be looking for?
Yeah.
Because there's a few of them. What are some of the ones you...
Oh, well,
Have your mom.
if I had known then what I know now, look around the condition of the house, see if things are starting to smell funny or...
Yeah, I was going to say sorry in advance, because some of these things, they're not easy to talk about.
No, they can be kind of icky to consider,
yeah.
but yeah, you have to start planning for these things early. And one of the things is to just kind of look at what's different. See, maybe there's been some changes in your mom or your dad that you really weren't aware of just recently. Are they walking better than they, or not as good as they used to?
Well, some of the signs that aren't very comfortable to talk about are the hygiene,
Yeah.
and just they said the condition of the house. I mean, we're talking about cleanliness,
Right. Yeah. Things are starting to just look, not as clean as they were. Maybe the house is starting to smell a little funny. Maybe your parents are starting to smell a little funny. All that kind of stuff. I mean, it's
we're laughing, but
but because we've been there.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big things that you probably will notice right away. And along with that is, how are your parents getting along? Are they starting to have trouble navigating stairs or driving, or any of those kinds of things? That's the sort of stuff you want to look at.
But it's more that there's it's a baseline. So if you notice changes, what I mean?
Right.
If your folks' house have been spotlessly clean, and then all of a sudden you're just seeing that trash cans aren't emptied, or there's bits of paper, and a lot of times
stuff on the floor.
A lot of times because it's an eyesight issue too. They don't see smaller bits of things.
Yeah, or they have a hard time.
The toilet isn't as clean as it was.
And they have a hard time bending over to pick things up and to clean things, so things stay on the floor when they fall on the floor.
On the other hand, like my grandmother, my God,
well, she was
off the toilet.
She was a freak of nature. She was pretty amazing. Yeah. But
so you look for different things. Like I said, mobility is a big issue, right?
Yep.
How they're responding in conversations.
Yeah. And if you notice any memory impairment starting to happen there, maybe they tell the same stories kind of over and over and over again.
Well, we do that too.
But you know what I mean. It's just if you start to see that, the conversation
in the same conversation.
and things are starting to, kind of go a way that you've not seen before. Pay attention to that, because it could really mean something.
Now, almost anything can be a trigger. It might not be anything, and especially though, I have to emphasize this: if your parents are still, mentally alert,
right?
And that's the thing. I mean, again, we feel that at 60 now, where our minds don't feel like 60.
Right.
A lot of times we're thinking like we're 20.
Right. Yeah.
Well, from our friends that are older, we know the same thing in our parents. We know that happens when you're 80 and 90
Right.
sometimes.
Yeah. Well,
right?
my mom is a perfect example of that. I mean, she's
Yep.
sharp as a tack,
I remember my friend Charlie that I golfed with, who was
Right.
in his 90s.
Right. Yeah. Oh my God.
It was
Yeah.
like
He was
talking to a
amazing.
25-year-old.
Yeah. Well, he was also physically really, really strong for
Yeah.
a long time too, because he
Right.
was so active. Yeah.
But there's a case in point where he started to lose, his ability to walk as well and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is, it's whatever really is there that triggers it. But the important thing is, and we'll talk about having the conversation in the next section.
Yeah.
But you got to have the conversation, right?
Yeah.
Because what happens if you ignore it?
And things get to kind of crisis level, and it's that scalded frog kind of thing too.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah,
right?
where
Yeah.
your parents have kind of gotten used to living the way that they're living, and they're living, and the house isn't clean, and they're
Well,
not
and
clean.
we get used to seeing it.
Right, and
So,
but they have no idea that the changes have happened. And by the time you actually talk to them about it and say, look, Mom, your house smells and you smell and everybody's noticing it, they're not going to have a clue what you're talking
Forgetting
about.
to pay bills.
Yeah, all of that. But it's
You know.
that stuff that happens just a little bit at a time, and they won't be aware of it unless you make them aware of it.
And I don't want to gloss over that one, because the financial stuff can be a real trigger,
Yeah.
right? If you find that your parents are forgetting to pay bills, if they start talking about, I got a notice from the power company,
Or
I don't
I have a
understand
late
why.
fee on my credit card or something like that.
Yeah, and I had
Yeah.
experience on the other side of that, because spirit of full disclosure, when I was very young, sound like an old guy, but when I was very young, I used to work at a credit company,
Right.
right? I used to be a collector at a credit company.
Yeah.
And those are some of the things that we would hear, when we were talking sometimes to older clients. They didn't realize that, and I would hear responses. I would call them, and by the time they got to my desk, they were like 60 days past due. Right?
Yeah. Right.
And here's what they would say. Well, I've always paid that bill on time.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
They couldn't imagine that they'd missed that payment.
Right.
Right. And so
Yeah.
those are the things that are really a sign that something needs to be paid attention
Well,
to.
and again, speaking from personal experience, sort of what happens sometimes too is that they just get overwhelmed with stuff they used to be able to manage really easily, and then there's a pile that starts to happen, and we just went through that where there was stuff from 2017. 18, 19 mixed in with, current bills, and they get to the bottom of the pile. And then before you know it, things are behind and things aren't getting paid, and
It just gets lost.
and it just gets lost. Yeah.
All right. So the important thing that we really just need to emphasize once more is that you've got to watch for these signs. You've got to watch for these certain triggers, these events that happen.
Right. And some of
just
them can
lapses
be
of
really
things.
small too. You
Yeah.
want to just before
That's the point.
before they get to be, the huge elephant in the room that
Yeah.
nobody wants to talk about. You got to keep your eyes open and just
And
be aware of
that's
these
the
little
big-
changes.
That's the big part of it, because the question that always comes up, is it cool to talk about these things?
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
especially when they're small, because then you can be a little more lighthearted about it, even joke about
Again, if I knew then what I know now kind of thing, if I had seen some of the things that had started to happen for my mom a long time ago,
Yeah.
it would have been easier to have the conversation before things got to a kind of a crisis level.
it. Okay, so let's summarize it. Watch for changes,
Mhm.
right? Mentally and physically.
Yep.
Even subtle changes,
Mhm.
small changes need to be paid attention to,
Yeah.
right?
Before they become big changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Address it early,
hmm
have the conversation.
Yep.
And a lot of times that's the fix right there, at least
Yeah.
for quite a long time.
Yeah,
Right?
just starting the dialogue is
Mhm.
really, really important, and sooner rather than later.
This goes along with one of our 3 key steps.
Yeah.
Plan
Early.
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 And that's the part of it. Okay,
Exactly.
so the earlier you can have the conversation and set the table, it might be 10, might be 20 years before someone needs assisted living or nursing help or things like that.
Yeah.
But it's never too early to start the process.
Exactly.
Well, that's a point, something that happened. There's a question I had for you is, what were some of the early warning signs that now you would recognize? Because, they say hindsight's 2020, but it's 2020 for the people who are coming next, right?
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
some of the things that you saw that
Well,
you kind of pushed aside?
Yeah, it has a lot to do with actually the kind of stuff that we just identified in the video package, which was that I just noticed that things weren't really the same, I mean, and that's harder to be aware of when you're out of state. Actually, somebody just asked me that question as well as, how do you handle this kind of stuff as you're out of state, and during COVID in particular, which makes things really challenging. But, there were things that happened with my mom several years ago. It's not like this just kind of happened overnight. And it never does. Those are the things that we were talking about. It's just a little bit at a time, the way that it happens. And my mom always used to keep her house really clean. She was also paid always a lot of attention to how she looked and how she dressed, and having her nails done and making sure that she had good perfume on and all that kind of stuff. And those things began to sort of evaporate. And I found that when I saw her when visiting for the holidays and things like that. The house just didn't look right. It started to smell funny. There was more trash. There were things in the sink. Mom wasn't paying attention to herself, and that just got worse and worse and worse as the years went on until, it became kind of came to a crisis over the summer. So, yeah.
Yeah, you threw the COVID thing in now because, this stuff is evergreen.
Right.
We're not dealing with anything different than generation before, the generation that's following is going to. But with COVID, with the isolation, now it's even tougher because you can't be in the room with people, right? A lot of the time.
And you can't see the changes as often or as they're happening as you would if you lived right in the same area and you were able to drop by and, have dinner with mom on the weekend or whatever. And you can see those things happen right away because you're there.
There might be a flip side to that though, too. So, because sometimes if you don't see somebody for a long time, then you see them, then suddenly the changes are more noticeable.
Yeah, that's true. That's
right?
true.
So it happens with kids. And it happens with, So, and I think I experienced that kind of with your mom where, all of a sudden I noticed, whoa, this is different.
No, that's actually a really good point because that's true. There was a period where I hadn't seen her for several months and I got down there. I was like, wow, what happened to the house and what happened to mom and gee whiz, but I'd like to back up a little bit to this because one of the, I had a question that came in. These have come in from email and they've come from Facebook and they've come from chats. And certainly as we're talking here too, if there are things that come up that you want to talk about, please put them in the chat and we'll make sure that we address them for you.
Yeah, and your experiences too. If you have some ideas
definitely
that we're overlooking, and we're going to aggregate all these ideas so that we're creating this program, we're going to have a resource area where people can go.
Right. And what I'd like to say too is that we've got a ton of resources that we're going to share with you at the end of the live stream. And so if you DM us with your email address, I'll send you links to everything. We've also got a couple of really, really helpful checklists from Jennifer Benjamin of Family First, who will be in here later. And she talks about warning signs for Alzheimer's and dementia and how to keep people safe in their homes. And, it's just really super valuable resources.
So we don't stray off.
So what I was going to say was that let's back up to kind of what things can be done early. And this is a question that came in from a lot of people, which is how do you deal with elderly parents that need help, that refuse help, but they clearly need it? I bet that came in from probably, 9 or 10 different people. So
it's probably one of the biggest questions.
Yeah. So what I was going to say was if we talk about this, you talk about things that can be done early, before things really become a problem and before the hygiene is a factor and safety is a factor and all of those things. And mom and dad are, doing okay, living alone. They want to continue to age in place. There's a lot of resources that you can offer to help them with that. And I'm going to put this in in some links for you too. But there's a couple different apps that are really helpful for this. And everybody's heard of Meals on Wheels. Those are, I'm sure, available in your area. Sometimes it can be very hard to get on the mailing list for that because, especially with COVID and more and more people are taking advantage of those services. But we found an organization called Silver Cuisine that is a subscription service. It offers a lot of the same stuff, but that's mom and dad aren't cooking as much as they used to, or you really don't want them to. That's an option that's there. Of course, MobileHelp, we already talked about, a medical alert system. And then there's a great program called Iamfine, which is, that's a great resource for people that are actually maybe doing okay in their homes. And they really just don't want, people kind of checking in on them all the time.
If you go to the Big 60 Life .blog.
Yeah.
And there's an article there that talks about Iamfine and MobileHelp and some of these.
Right. Yep. And we'll have all of that too. Again, if you DM us, that'll be part of the whole resource guide that we're going to offer to you.
We're also we've got another video to play for you in a couple of minutes that talks about how to have the conversation, because a lot of people are talking about that. But one thing I want to emphasize is that it's never too early.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? If we can get these things planned out beforehand.
Before they become big problems and you find out, what your parents want and what they don't want and what kind of resources they have. And, then having a lot of these conversations become easier, before the collective poop hits the fan. So
that's something to touch on too, because purposely being a little snarky here at the Big 60 Life, right? And part of the reason is this: most of the resources we found about, dealing and managing with elderly parents, and I want to touch on that, the reluctant parent again in a second, but most of the materials were either so soft, right?
Yeah, sad piano music in the background.
Well, and that's okay, but the people are, it's very difficult to deal with. And we just found that probably like you, most of our friends don't talk like that.
It's driving me crazy. What do I do? Oh my gosh. Yeah.
My mom said she was going to drive off a cliff. I said, good, I'll buy the gas. You know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not funny, but that's the kind of,
Well, it is
you have to
funny.
keep a sense of humor during this stuff,
Yeah.
especially if you're really dealing with, really significant challenges.
Listen, I'm going to say from
So-
from one of my past lives, I mean, I was a firefighter and we dealt with some very grisly things.
Right,
And then
right.
personally, I dealt with some very grisly things. And if you don't have a sense of humor about it, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. I
Right.
mean, there are times to be serious, and there's times, especially when you're hanging out with friends and commiserating a little bit, where you can you can let your hair down a little bit.
Yeah,
And so
right.
don't be afraid with us if you
Right.
have a joke or something. to
Yeah, and
put in-
especially because other people
the
are going
comments,
through the
that's cool.
same thing, right?
Yeah.
You sit down, have a glass of wine, and go, "Geez, I'm not going to make it through
I'm
this
not going to
week.
make it.
Oh my God!"
And that's
Yeah.
again part of the reason we're creating these resources, so we'll have a place to get
Where people
together
can
and
vent.
you can vent a little
You can
bit.
bring a cocktail. Tell us
Yeah.
what's going on. Yeah.
But now,
exactly.
regards to the reluctant parent, one
Right.
thing I want to emphasize, and you'll hear this again in the video as well, right? Is if an elderly person is of sound mind and they are just refusing help, one thing that we have to do is manage our expectations.
Right.
It's one of the key things that we've learned.
Right.
If they really dig their heels in, what can you do?
Yeah.
They're making their own decisions.
Yeah.
Now, there's a point where the problem is, and I don't think we hit this on the video, that's why I wanted to talk about it,
Sure.
is that you can get a lot of resentment happening, right? You want to do what's best for your parents. You want to do
Right.
what's best for them. You know it's what's best for
You
them.
know it's the right
You
thing.
know it's the right thing to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And they just
they're just not having it.
refuse. And
Yeah.
right, we just heard from somebody who's really in the throes of that, right? One of the comments that you talked about the other
Right.
day.
Yeah.
And I know I could feel the desperation. They're saying, well, what do we do? Well, at a certain point, a lot of the time, there are certain things that can happen. A property can be condemned. We've known stories where that's happened if
Yep.
it's unsafe. The person can be committed if the authorities
Adult protective services can
decide
get
that they
involved.
simply
The
can't
police
care
can
for
get
themselves.
involved. Yeah. I mean I
Yeah.
mean, nobody wants to get to that point.
Well,
but-
it has to be pretty severe.
right.
So,
Right.
if the person's managing, even though they're not managing to the standards we'd like to see, okay, but they're surviving. And let's face it, in a lot of areas, these resources are very strained. So they're only going to take the worst cases. Okay.
Right.
So if someone's really digging their heels in, what we really have to do is just accept it. And instead of being resentful and causing more argument and more aggravation, my advice is really be patient and be there when they are ready. Okay, and again, I'm coming at that from personal experience. Spirit of full disclosure, you'll hear this in some of the videos. One of my past lives, I was a drug addict when I was in my early 20s. And people were very frustrated with me because they
Right.
couldn't help me, right?
Right.
They knew what was good for me. I didn't know what was good for me.
Yeah.
Right. And fortunately, a couple of them, they just hung in there.
Yeah.
They hung in there until I was ready
Right.
to reach out and ask for help, or I was receptive
Right.
for the help. And it's no different, I think, with the elderly parents.
Yeah, I think that's also where the whole idea of planning early can be really helpful, because I started researching a lot of options for my mom, when I saw a lot of the warning signs years ago, and she just wasn't having it. She wasn't having the discussion. She wasn't, I don't want people in my house. I'm fine. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
All of that. So I just started, because that's what I do. I started just collecting a bunch of resources, and Jennifer Benjamin, who I mentioned earlier, is with an organization called Family First. I can't say enough good things about these people. And she was also a wealth of information. There's a ton of resources
We're going to
available.
have her on.
She's going to be on a little bit later, I think. She's got a support group that she's handling, for Alzheimer's and dementia family as we speak. So she should come on a little bit later. But my point was simply going to be, I found resources for caregiving. I found resources for elevator, escalators up and down the stairs,
The
and
stair lifts,
walk-in tub. Thank you, stair lifts, and walk-in tubs, and
safety bars,
and
a lot of
medical alert systems,
and
and
a lot of these things
all
are
of
very
that.
easy. Yeah, and you need to know too, when we make an endorsement for something like MobileHelp, it's because that's what we chose.
Right.
Yeah. And we're giving a lot of different options too, but when we really push the hell yeah button, that's our endorsement.
Especially for something like this. I mean,
yeah.
you need to know that anything that we give a ringing endorsement for, it's something that we've either used personally or know somebody who has and feel really strongly about it. Yeah.
It's probably a good place to roll that second video about the conversation. Because,
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
How do you have the conversation? What should you be, lining? How do you get your ducks in a row and get ready for this thing? So should we go ahead and roll that?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see what happens with this one. All right. The big thing we're talking about today is how to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now it's time.
Now it's time.
The triggers have happened, or catastrophes happen, the fall,
Someone,
the
there's been a
emergency
fall,
call.
there's been an accident, something like that. Yeah, and
Can't put it off anymore.
Right, it's now time to.
And it's not easy.
Yeah, no, it's
Let me
not.
tell you. Every time I say that, I catch myself because I've talked to a lot of people now where the conversation was pretty easy.
Yeah,
Or mom and dad were prepared already. They were preparing themselves. They want the help. They want to go into assisted living. They want to get some care.
it's been part of their plan all the way along.
Okay.
Yeah, they've got long-term care insurance, all that kind of stuff. They
And
got all
if
their
that's
ducks
you,
in a row.
If that's your story,
Then
great.
awesome,
Push
lucky
fast
you.
forward.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Just go on to the next step.
right,
But let's talk about what it's like if the conversation is going to be difficult.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's if say your mom or your dad has been without their spouse for quite some time, and they're firmly dug into the house that they've shared with their partner for many, 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 many years. All the memories are there, all their stuff is there, and they're just entrenched. They don't want to move. They don't want to go. It's nothing. You're going to have to blast them out of the house. So, there's things that have to happen, for that to become a reality.
Okay, the first thing is prepare yourself, right?
Yeah.
And this is what you're really good at.
Yeah.
You did a lot of research, right? You had all your ducks in a row. You understood what the different options were for
Right.
home care, what they were for assisted living,
And how
for
much all
nursing
that
homes,
costs.
how much it was going to cost,
Yeah.
how it was going to be paid for,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And have all that ready to go,
Yep.
right? So you're just laying out options.
Yeah, because especially if your parent doesn't have long-term care insurance, which a lot of our parents don't, because of it wasn't a thing really until just recently. Medicare doesn't cover a lot of that stuff. It's all out of pocket. So knowing in advance what the financial situation is for your parents and what options they do have is going to save you a lot of time, because you'll know realistically what you can suggest and what you can't. You can't walk in there and say, this assisted living community is only $8,000 a month. They don't have, right? I know, but that's a
They
lot.
didn't have a heart attack before, they'll have
But
one now.
but that's also what a lot of those places cost, especially if you live in a metropolitan area. So
Next one, and this is huge, because what happened to you when
oh
people were in different
yeah,
places with
I
this,
have
right?
to say this, and pardon my language, but I'm always the asshole. I'm always the person who brings up these things and, hey, mom, you got to pay attention to this, and this is the problem. And there's one of those in every family. I know I'm not speaking just for myself. But yeah, getting the rest of your family members on the same page is super important, because then it's not just
You're not in the adversarial.
You're right, and
role
you're not
all the time.
always the bully, and you're not always the you said this, but nobody else said it, so it's got to be just.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of times, and I know you've been through this too, where you're the one kind of laying out the facts based on what you have, right?
Right.
And then someone else says, oh, it's not a problem.
Right.
So the main thing is just to make sure you get a care circle involved, right?
Right.
And make sure everybody has all the information.
Yep.
And that they're all on the same page, so
Yeah.
that you're consistent in what you're saying.
Yeah, and how you
Yeah.
approach your parent or parents about the issues that that they're dealing with.
This one, they're all huge, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. What isn't huge about all of
Yeah.
this? Yeah.
But really, this one I know is one that you struggled with,
Yep.
because it's hard when you're emotionally invested. But you've got to just point out what you see.
Right.
No judgment.
Yep.
No solutions right
yeah,
now, right?
because you don't want to just try and fix everything. They've got your parents have to be involved in the discussion.
We hit this over and over again. One of our key points.
Yep.
It's their
It's
life,
their life.
right?
Yep.
Involved in every step of the way.
Right.
And especially if they're of sound mind, they have to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
You're helping them.
Yeah.
You're not telling them what to do.
Exactly.
And of course, one of the best questions we learn to ask is what?
How can I help?
How can I help? Right?
Yeah.
Not I'm going to do.
Or you need
You
to.
need to do.
Yeah, exactly. How
Yeah.
can I help? What do you want me to do? How can I make this better for you?
This is awful, but I feel like I'm picking on you with some of these things. But
No,
because
just
we're
go ahead. Yeah.
because we're learning so much from your own
Right.
experience,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Manage your expectations.
Yeah, that's really big. Yeah, especially if you're like me and you're a person who just wants to make everything better for people that you
Yeah.
love. I mean, that's not always the right
No, and
option.
this conversation is step one.
Right.
It's the beginning of the process,
Right.
not the end,
Not
not
the
even
end.
the middle, right?
And things may change too. You might
Mhm.
one day you might think, oh, thank God, everything's all set, and then poof, something happens the next day.
Or the other way, you
Yeah.
might find in the process. I
Yeah.
went through this with my grandfather.
Right.
Where, it looked like he needed more intense care, and it turned out he had kidney stones was his thing,
Right,
right? And
right.
once that was taken care of,
And he was fine.
bang, it
Yeah.
was a miraculous turnaround. So
Right.
yeah, it's a process that you go through. Just the key thing, manage
your
the
expectations. Yeah.
And I probably should add to that too, right? Your parents' expectations are more important than ours,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
That's the point.
Yeah.
It's about them, not
Yeah.
about us.
Exactly.
I'd just like to add one closing thought here, right?
Okay.
we've been talking about this in terms of it being an adversarial
Right. And a really
experience,
negative
right?
experience.
And,
Yeah.
and it might be, but it doesn't need to be.
Right. And the process might be negative, but the outcome might be amazingly positive for
Yeah.
everybody involved.
If you follow the steps, like I said, it's about them, not
Yep.
about you, not about us, right?
Right.
And just make sure that you're laying out the observations,
Without judgment.
asking them what they think,
Ask them what they want.
ask them what they want, ask
Yeah.
them where they want to go from
Where
here,
they
right?
wanna
Because
land.
the end result is we want to have a positive, happy life for the people we care about.
Absolutely.
A lot of good points we're going to get to too, and we should say these videos are available on the big60.life too, and these two.
Yeah.
And we're going to put a lot more of these in the program. That we keep talking about the program that's still taking shape, but we should have that rolled out very soon.
Yeah.
And
And we thank you so much
Yeah.
for all of your input, because we're actually
Mhm.
crafting a lot of this program kind of as we speak.
Based on what you're
Based on what people
giving
have.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So Lou had a great point. He just said, and thank you, Lou. He's such a big supporter of the
Yeah.
Big 60 Life. Really appreciate
Hi,
it.
Lou.
We just set up a power of attorney for my mom. She's 75. We have 2 people on it, and they have to be in agreement to take action. I think
Wow.
that's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are you saying that you that it could be a challenge to have both people on board because 2 people have to?
I think
Very
that
good.
I personally think
Yeah.
that gives you some strength in numbers. You know what I mean? So like you said in the video, you're not the a-hole all the time, right?
Right. Yeah.
And the family is basically pivoting around you.
And also, not one person just doesn't have complete control over what's going on. If mom or dad is in a situation where they can't make decisions for themselves in a medical capacity, then if you've got 2 people that are working together, then it's not one person thinking, okay,
Right.
this is what's got to happen, and the other person doesn't agree.
But you're pretty
That can
lucky in
cause a
that
lot of-
regard because everybody, I think the thing you've done very well proactively is you've gotten people on the same page.
Thank you for that.
When you're saying you're the a-hole, it's really that your mom sometimes says, and this is some of the
Yeah.
pushback that you'll hear from
Yeah.
elderly parents, right?
Yeah.
You want
You
me
just
to
want
do
me
this,
to
or
fill in the blank.
whatever
Yeah.
the case may be.
Right.
And it's hard to convince them otherwise, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so I think it's good that you've got your brother involved, and
Mhm.
you've got a care circle. You've got a cousin who's involved. You've
And
got
my
a dear
godmother, who's my
Yeah,
mom's
dear
best
friend
friend. Yeah,
your
because
mom.
for a while there, what was happening was when things happened medically, and we had doctors were telling me things, and police officers were telling me things, and people were telling me, but they weren't telling my mom. So I had to go to her and say, look, this is what is happening. This is what's got to happen as a result. And then there was always friction that happened because of that.
That's a weird one you just brought up too, and we
Yeah.
still haven't found an answer to it. We know other people who have been going through it, but we really still haven't got a good response to this. Is that sometimes when the authorities come in, because the police had to respond to Alex's mom's house
She
twice
fell.
because she
Yeah.
fell, and
Yeah.
she called 911, right?
Right. Yeah.
And they'd get on the phone with Alex, and they'd say, "Look, this place isn't safe for her right now. You need to do this.
Yep.
You need to do that.
She needs this.
Your
she
mom
needs
shouldn't
that.
be here alone."
Right.
And
Yep.
of course, with your mom digging her heels in, it was tough.
Yep.
And it was frustrating to us because when we would talk to her about it, she'd say, "Well, that's just you saying that."
Right. Nobody
Right?
told me that. The officer didn't tell me that.
And we
the
can't-
doctor didn't
yeah.
tell me that.
And
So
please share if you've got some
that's
insights.
what makes
or
me
you've-
the asshat.
right? If you've had this kind of experience, because we're
Yeah.
not sure why the authorities wouldn't tell the person affected directly. But a lot of times they won't.
Right.
And we're hearing that story a lot.
Right. A lot.
We just
Yeah.
don't know why.
Yeah.
There are people who will when a social worker gets involved. She's been very helpful.
Yeah. Thank God for social workers. Because
But before you dig in,
Yeah.
I want to say, hey, thank you, Jeff McCluskey. And
Right.
you'll get to see him on some of the issues we're dealing with finances, and I'm sure we'll get him into this discussion.
we actually-
and
Go ahead.
Spencer Hughes. Spencer Hughes has chimed in a little earlier.
Spencer's a dear friend and
Yeah.
had us on his show
We were
just
on
last
his
weekend.
show.
Yeah. But yeah, let's turn the corner on Jeff, I think, because this could kind of tie in a little bit to what Lou was talking about with power of
And
attorney.
chime in, Jeff, if you got some
Yeah,
advice.
one of the questions that came in via email was, how do you talk to your parents about, end of life and long-term care insurance?
Especially if they're very closeted about their
Right.
finances.
Yeah. How do you start that conversation? Because it's something that family members don't often want to talk about that stuff.
And the one thing, we got to pull this elephant out of the closet, right? Because a lot of times we've heard this over and over again. An elderly parent will say, "Well, you're just after my money." Well,
Yeah.
hell no, because you don't have any.
You don't have any.
Usually-
Yeah. I'm going to bring that up in another
Or,
comment. Yeah.
right, that you're protecting it. And I've been through this with a friend where you're protecting the money that they have
Right.
left there.
Right.
This is a friend who was terminal.
Yeah.
And it's not that you want the money at the end; it's you want to make sure they have enough resources.
Exactly. And that's one of the struggles
which is something Jeff talks about a lot.
Right.
You don't want to outlive your money.
No. And this actually came in from someone who said my mom got to a point where she wasn't safe in her own home. She was falling, couldn't dress herself, needed assistance bathing. She rejected going to assisted living. I had to forcibly bring her.
I hear a butt coming in.
The first place she went, the first place she left by calling a cab, went back to her house and changed all the locks. We had to call the police.
She's an OBA.
Oh my God. We had to call the police, break in and take her back. The police and facility director were all in agreement that she needed to be there. They basically said she had to stay. We had to get rid of the house ASAP so she couldn't go back. She didn't talk to me for several years after that. And even after that, she was very curt. Mm-hmm. She accused me of trying to steal her money and she didn't have any. It was a very trying time. Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff that can happen.
Well, that sounds like there was a committal or something like that involved too, because we have a lot of friends in law enforcement from back in our martial arts days.
Right.
And a couple of them, as we got into this project, a couple of them talked to me about stories where, they actually started a condemnation process or a committal process because the person just couldn't take care of themselves. Right. So there are agencies that can get involved, but of course, you don't want to do that.
Hopefully it doesn't get to that point.
Extreme,
right? And I think we should probably back up from that because obviously that's a very extreme situation. And of course, nobody wants that to happen. And my heart goes out to the person who was dealing with that.
That's why we keep talking and emphasizing about planning.
Exactly.
Understanding what these triggers are, because the triggers are pretty universal. We're going to expand on that a lot, again, as we flesh out the program.
Right.
And please add yours. What are the signs that you should look for, that you should expect? And like we said, we talked about some of them: personal hygiene, the condition of the house, inside and out, because sometimes elderly people can't do the maintenance work that they need to do.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Of course, if they're sound minded and they have the resources, they can certainly hire people. I want to emphasize this. We're not talking about getting people out of their house if that's where they want to be.
Right.
There's resources to help keep people in their homes too, mm-hmm. aging in place. Yeah. We're going to get into that in more detail in future episodes. But because of our personal experience, right now the turn is that's not really an option. It's come to the point where assisted living, maybe even nursing care, is really where we're headed.
Yeah, because and part of the biggest issue for that, quite frankly, there's two big things that it's really got the alarm bells are ringing for that right now. I mean, mm-hmm. thankfully, after all of this came to a head, when we had a crisis over the summer, and now my mom is at home with care, thank God. So she's safe. She's got people there. We've got the medical alert system. So I know we don't have to worry about her anymore, which is huge. However, the only people she's interacting with right now are her caregivers, which is, my mom is a social, brilliant, funny person. And, it just kills me to see that she's not leaving her house anymore. She's not wearing her clothes. She's not going out for lunch. She's not going to church, all that stuff.
Walks.
Right.
Just stay active. That's the
exactly
crucial thing.
But then the other thing too, this is the big one, is cost. I mean, mercifully, she's in a position right now that she can afford the care that she has. I'm sure Jeff will chime in this about long-term care insurance, but she doesn't have any long-term care insurance. So that's a finite amount of time that she's going to be in the house with this level of care. And I don't see the care declining.
No, it'll probably increase.
It'll probably increase.
Yeah,
so that's going to get really expensive really fast. So
we should hit that before we wrap up for today too, is that the strain on the relationship that you have. I mean, this is, I don't think I'm talking out of turn. This has caused a lot of stress in our relationship, and we're managing it well, I think, but it'd be foolish to say it's not there.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
hard.
Just the amount of time, the focus, and then the anguish when, especially when you got these ups and downs. Mom says, "Oh yeah, great, I'm going to move to assisted living next week, sell the house," and then
you want this chair?
2 days later, no,
I'm not going anywhere. Yeah, it's and the up and down thing is just, oh my God, the stress levels that go with that.
And I have to say, my level of patience for it has gotten very thin. So a lot of times it's not always the right thing, but my response sometimes is, look, I'm tired of it. I've heard this song before.
Yep.
You're singing in a different key. Not even a different key lately, right?
Yeah.
It's just the same thing over and over, but you have to brace yourself for that, because sometimes, it's not going to be a straight line to get mom and dad where they're safe and secure, whether that's aging in place or whether it's assisted living. The aging in place thing too is critical, because a lot of times, and there are exceptions to the rule. Like I said, I keep talking about my grandmother and these things, right?
Yeah. Well,
there are people, she's a freak of nature, but there's people that can
she was an animal.
Take care of themselves well. And we just watched that. We share this on the Facebook group. the video of that guy, 104 years old. He just passed away. 104, still working full time at Walmart.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Go on.
And he was,
That's amazing.
he was going for it.
Yeah.
So, but there are a lot of times when, and I'm sure he's one of them, where they still need help and they're hesitant. I don't want people in my house.
I don't want people in my
on
house.
my property.
Yeah.
And
Get off my lawn.
this
Yeah.
is something we've been kind of dancing around, but some people, especially in the previous generations, don't deal well with some of the folks that are in these businesses, handyman businesses, lawn care and stuff like that. If they don't speak English as their first language, if they
can't
see them
understand
as
them.
foreigners and there's biases that work.
Yeah,
into it.
and that's that's an elephant in the room. But I mean, if your parents are older, that can be a real issue, and
it could be an obstacle.
It can be an obstacle, and my mother, for example, thinks everybody's going to steal from her. Doesn't matter who it is, just they're going to rob me blind. I don't want them in my bedroom. They're going to, so that's also part of the resistance that comes in.
And we have to be respectful of that too, even if it's not, our worldview. You know what I mean?
Right.
We're talking about our parents, their wishes. You don't want to just turn around and say, "Mom, you're paranoid. You're an idiot."
Right. Well, and one of the things I do want to say too, and that when
and it does happen. So that's part of the reasons we want to make sure we're picking the right resources,
right?
Reputable companies that are coming in for the home care, for the lawn care.
Exactly, and that's I addressed your question about that earlier, Jeff, when you were saying that are there resources that you use? And what I did was I just Googled aging care for aging parents in where my mom lives, and there was just wealth of information that came up. Of course, there's national organizations like, Visiting Angels and A Place for Mom and, all of that. But if you can hone in on what's happening locally, that's really helpful and then just see if they're certified, check their reviews, do your homework. Yeah. I mean, and it's time consuming, but I started doing that years ago.
But that's a way you can really help your elderly parents too. And again, not to just dump it on them and say, "Here, this is the person," but to give them a couple of good options and say, "Hey, Mom, Now, the other thing, and as long as we're on the subject, because 'tis the season again, there's a lot of people going around. The asphalt business is a big one. There's a lot of scams that focus on elderly people.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if they don't feel they can, take care of themselves. So I use this word because it's part of my heritage too, but they call them the gypsy asphalt guys, right? They come around, they don't have a home base. They say, "Hey, we've got some left over here," and pretty much what they do is just dump a bunch of asphalt on the driveway without any prep. So you want to be a little bit careful about that. You want to vet and get, there's plenty of reputable people in each area. And these days, social media and Yelp and what's the one for? I should know this off the top of my head. For the trades and whatnot, there's a
Craigslist.
No, there's another one. I'm sorry.
Angie's List.
Angie's List.
Angie's List.
Angie's List. No, there's one more too. We'll put all this stuff together.
But going back to vetting people for care.
That's
there she is.
Too.
There's Jennifer. Yay! Yeah, Jennifer. I'm so glad that you're on here. I have to say that Jennifer Benjamin was a godsend for me for a number of reasons, and the only reason we didn't go with her organization, Family First, is because my mom needs care beyond that. She needs a home health aide. And this is the kind of stuff also too that you have to start navigating if you're investigating this on your own. A companion, which is what Jennifer's organization provides, only handles, a person in the home to do things like help with, light housekeeping and cooking and trips to the doctors and things like that.
See, that's so important because that's one of the ways people can age in place.
Right, exactly. And if my mom had agreed to that years ago, I think she probably would be in a much different situation than she is now. But but now she's in a place where she needs a home health aide, which is a totally different agencies handle it. You're talking about personal care, helping with showering and toileting and all that other kind of stuff. So, and those are people that should be certified, etc. So
and then the next level up from that is your CNAs and your nurses,
assisted living, and then nursing care.
But even in the home, you could have nurses full time, and so
round the clock nursing care.
Very expensive.
That's super.
Why don't you mention Jennifer's organization?
Yeah, Jennifer's organization is Family First. Okay, and I can put a link up for that.
Well, what's this one she put? She said the National Home
Care Association of America. Yeah. There's. And Jennifer sent me.
Look in the comments, you'll see this.
Yeah, she sent me this phenomenal list. This is one of the questions I actually wanted to bring up.
Go for it.
It was that somebody that, and I'm going to, Jennifer, I'm going to let you speak to this. I know you sent me this giant checklists about this, and I'm going to include that when you send us the email.
We'll have Jennifer on a video.
We'll have Jennifer on as a guest.
We should have set her up because we can invite people in on these live streams. So if you have some information that you want to share, and Jeff, certainly, I think you're going to be one on this.
Right.
We'll set you up so that we can have you right on the live stream with us.
But this is the question, and Jennifer, I'd like you to respond to this directly if you would. How do you know? Wait a minute. At what point does forgetfulness become something else? What are the signs of dementia and Alzheimer's?
Yeah, because not to make light about that, but those are things that we all deal with at certain ages, right?
Like being forgetful?
Yeah. And I was reading a really interesting article about that some people really panic and freak out. They say, oh my God, I've got Alzheimer's, or somebody else has Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a very serious illness. It's a very acute illness, right? Just being forgetful isn't enough.
That's stuff that happens to us now. When you're turning 60, you walk into a room, you don't remember why you went in there.
But listen, I'm going to make you all feel better about this, because the gist of the article, and I don't remember where this came from. It was either Harvard Pilgrim or something like that. And the study that they did showed that people our age, people hitting the big 60 and plus, right?
Yeah.
And Jennifer just said
forgetfulness is normal.
Well,
thanks.
Right. What they found out over time is that, just like the memory on your computer, you've got X amount of space there in your short-term memory.
Your hard drive.
Well, more or less, right?
Yeah.
And so as we're older and we're just processing a lot more stuff, we tend to filter out things that aren't very important, you see?
Right.
So I don't know, it made me feel better.
Of
course, I have the concussions too.
Yeah, but this is a really important differentiator. She said forgetfulness is normal as we age. Forgetfulness that affects daily life is
Jennifer,
different.
Can you put some of those indicators? Like I know for my grandfather, one of them was that we've found out that I forgot what I was going to say. That's awful.
Sorry.
We found out that he was forgetting to eat a couple of meals a day,
right?
Things like that. He was forgetting to turn the stove off. He had a gas stove.
And that's actually, Jennifer gave us a great resource for that too, which I also want to include. So, yeah.
But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, but if you can list some of those things, these are the things that we're really talking about. Not just, who did I talk to 10 minutes ago? Because a lot of us can't remember that.
Right. Yeah.
Here she goes. She said, if forgetting is affecting a person's ability to manage daily, pay bills, go grocery shopping. Good. That's good. That's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah.
We found the cupboard bear syndrome a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I don't think your mom has really memory issues.
No.
I think hers is more like she just got
tired and overwhelmed. And that's, she just looked around and just went, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired.
Yeah. You've got a list there?
Yeah. This list is.
Oh, Jennifer, don't type. Alex can read this.
Yeah. I'm going to, this is a list. I'm actually, if you really want all of this, she gave me like this gold mine of information about all of that.
Go to the blog.
Yeah. If you go to the blog, we'll have it there. We'll also, if you want to DM us, we can send you all of the resources that we're talking about today.
I should put that up.
So yeah. But one of the things that Jennifer mentions too, you're talking about, leaving the stove on. And I actually got contact with these people, and I think we're probably going to have one of them on the show as well. It's Fire Avert, fireavert.com, which is an awesome idea. They were on Shark Tank actually, and you just plug the stove plug into the Fire Avert, and once the smoke alarm goes off, the stove shuts off. How awesome is that? So you don't, if they're, I want to learn more about it, because my response, again, as a former firefighter, is that I leave the stove on. Isn't the fire already started by that? No, but it's terrible. He comes in, the burner's on again. What's the matter with you? Jennifer put up some other good ones. Yeah. Significant weight loss. Fender benders. Yeah. Mood swings. Yeah. Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah. So I think we're probably going to do a family room just on Alzheimer's and dementia, just because that's such a huge topic. And I'm blessed not to be going through that personally, but I know a lot of people who are. And then the other thing too, I'm hearing a lot about is, again, I'm blessed not to have to do this myself, is being a caregiver on the front lines. And that's a whole other challenge that if you're living at home with mom or dad, or they're living with you and you're taking care of them every single day, there's a whole other level of things that go along with that journey, and it can be very, very hard. There's a great website if you're in the middle of all of that, by the way. It's called agingcare.com. And what that is really is a series of forums, and you can't even, if there's a topic you want to look up, it's there, and there are people that are dealing with it. And there's just everything you could possibly want to know from a caregiver perspective, including burnout and physical issues and power of attorney, and really long-term care, all that stuff. It's all in there. Emphasize that we're not discouraging anybody from doing that. It's a really noble thing to do, and we've had friends that have done it. One of my closest brother by choice, Don, did that with his mom for several years. And you did it. But Grammy, too, so. I call her my Grammy too. But Grammy was also very active and sharp, and she needed a lot of help, but she didn't need a lot. She didn't need personal care, for example. She almost to the day she died, she could still shower herself and do those things, and she was a very meticulous woman that way. Right. But
you have to be braced that that is the possibility. The flip side is when he was passing, he had cancer. He needed that type of care. And we had a lot of friends that were chiming in and said, hey, you know, we'd be glad to help out, do the overnight care, because we were trying to manage it ourselves till the very end. And that's all fine. But the thing that I had to tell people was, look, this is a whole different level when you're going to be in the home with that type of care. So it's very intimate. You're going to be cleaning people, literally wiping them, cleaning them, doing that type of
Doing
thing.
all the really intimate
and you
care.
have to be comfortable with that. You know, that's the thing. You have to be comfortable with it. If you're not, then the situation's going to get really dicey, because then a lot of emotion comes up, and a lot of people that I know that have gone through it that didn't handle it well, they start getting resentful because they think the person is like a child, you know what I mean? Needs to change the diapers and whatnot. And it's not that way, especially when the person's mentally alert.
Jennifer's comment is spot on here. She says there are 45 million family caregivers in the United States, and they are often referred to as the silent patients. Yeah, they suffer from ailments of their own as a result of caregiving. Yeah,
I can imagine. I mean, it
it
as
can be
positive
very
as
taxing on our health.
Right, as positive as that experience was, it was still very stressful.
Yeah.
Even just in lack of sleep. You know.
Sure. And to turn the corner on that, actually, this is, let's say you get to a point where you can't care for your parent anymore, right? The needs are beyond your skill sets. You
There's
don't.
no shame in that.
Yeah. Well, this is actually a question that came in. How do you make peace with putting your parents in a nursing facility? There was no other option for us. Mom needed more care than we could give. I cried for 2 weeks after that decision.
You know, I think the question, the answer is simple, not easy, right? That's the best place for them to be.
Right.
You have to get yourself in the mindset where you realize that is the decision that's best for your parents, not just for you, because I know that people feel guilty. Oh my God, I'm not doing what I should be doing.
Right.
Well, we're not all equipped for that.
Yeah.
And frankly, these days, because we're living longer, we're living with, this is the other part of it. We're living with so many more ailments and whatnot. Alzheimer's is a good case in point.
Yeah.
People didn't live as long as they did with Alzheimer's years ago.
Right.
They died much more quickly than they do now. So we're caring for these, we're keeping people alive with a lot of these different conditions
for much longer.
Much longer.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult. Sometimes it even requires specialized equipment.
I can't wait to have you on.
But one thing too, I want to hit, because this is when we hit the unpaid bills.
But I want to respond to Jennifer's question, because this is just directly related to caregiving on the front line. She said, in our industry, we often hear references to the airline instructions: put on your own oxygen before putting the oxygen mask on of a loved one.
Right. If you end up in the hospital or the loony bin because of what you're doing, you're not any good to anyone.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Remember, we ran into that. It's funny because in our self-defense lives, in the self-defense business, people would always talk about it as selfish. No, the least selfish thing you can do is take care of yourself. The least selfish thing you can do for others is to take care of yourself, make yourself better. Because when you do, if you're better, you're stronger, you're more valuable to the people around you.
Yeah, and if you're completely depleted and exhausted and crying and not eating
destroying
and
yourself,
not working out and all of that, then you can't be any good to anybody.
And who else depends on you? That's the thing to think about
your
too.
Children or your spouse or your friends or whoever else that you've got in your life.
Employers.
Yeah.
Business partners.
There's when you have your day job.
Before we finish that unpaid bills thing, because we just sifted through a pile. Right.
Yeah.
And there were bills there that were back from 2017.
Well, no. What it was, it wasn't the bills were from that long ago. There was a pile on the table of papers that,
what I mean was we found that the current bills where the missed payments were.
Yeah. And they were mixed in with old papers from 2017, 2018, 2019. And it wasn't that, she was forgetting to pay the bills. They were just getting lost in the pile. And so she had it in her head that she'd already paid it. And
that's what I was going to say. Like I said in the video, because when I was a bill collector, that would happen quite often, where I'd call an elderly person who was 60, 90 days past due. And their response was, well, I've always paid that bill.
Right.
They couldn't imagine that they hadn't paid the bill.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It didn't even dawn on them that they hadn't paid the bill. So I think that's a big one, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and she said when placing a loved one in a nursing home, most families make that decision when the level of care needed is so great the family can't manage it at home.
And that's up to you, because, like I said, people don't realize what they're getting into sometimes. And
before you even get to that level too, that's where, if we back up a little bit before we even get to this point, that's where having an assessment done for your parent and for their home before all of this actually happens is a really important thing to do, because there are professionals that can walk through that journey with you, and they can determine the level of care your mom or dad needs. And if they're going to be capable of aging in place in their home successfully, or if they need a companion versus a home health aide,
Jennifer just brought up another good one.
Yeah.
We just got to have her on.
Right. I know. I just told her that, but she's got to be
because when the person stopped walking, is bedbound, that's often when the decision's made to go to a nursing home. And again, if you haven't had that experience to physically move somebody, right, who's, bedbound or, isn't ambulatory, isn't able to move around.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work, and not everybody can handle that. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And to get that
and you're not trained to be able to do it, to protect physically, to be able to do it without hurting yourself.
And we're back to dealing with the toiletry. And
sure.
So.
I actually, though, I do want to back up to the very beginning of all of this, before all of this happens.
We should mention, though, too, that we are going to do a family room just on the conversation coming up pretty soon.
That's what I was going to say, is that if it looks like mom and dad are doing well enough that they can age in place successfully, but they need some help, okay, and it would be a companion rather than a home health aide, just somebody to come in, do the stuff like helping them with, cleaning the house, grocery shopping, going to the doctors, just a couple hours a week sort of thing, Jennifer, I'd love to know, when you have, how do you make that suggestion? Because that goes back to what you were saying at the very beginning.
Yeah,
if people do need that kind of help, but they're refusing it.
Yeah.
How do you have that part of the conversation?
But let's talk about it in a healthy sense too.
Right.
That's why we keep emphasizing planning early, identifying these triggers, these standard triggers, the triggers that everybody can see, right? We're doing it for ourselves now.
Yeah.
When this happens, we're going to accept the following, right? When this happens, we're going to need this kind of help.
When I can no longer drive, this, when I can, someone, yeah.
Yeah. And
so
if we
thinking about before it happens.
If we make these decisions earlier, and it's still emotional, but I think it takes some of the emotion out of it, that these decisions are triggered by a tangible event, right? Not by somebody coming in after the fact and saying, like I said, one of the big triggers is the accident, right? Well, if you're having trouble with your reaction time, that's the time, or your eyesight, right? That's the time that you've decided, hopefully years before, when I can't see anymore, when I can't see well enough to drive, I'm going to stop driving.
Yeah.
That's much different than I've been managing, because there's the scalded frog again. People get by, right? They get by.
Yeah.
I haven't had an accident in 5 years. Because you're driving 3 miles an hour
down the middle of the road.
And you're lucky enough that.
And Jennifer actually said you can start with asking specifically, how's it going with going to the doctor? Yeah, I'm going to speak from.
Are you going to the doctor?
Well, yeah, I'm going to speak from personal experience about that too, because one of the things that we ended up, we're going to wrap up very quickly here, but one of the things that happened for me was, I asked my mom, hey, Ma, how you doing with the shower? How's that going for you? I know the shower's upstairs and you're all by yourself and you're afraid of it. And she said, I'm fine. I'm doing fine. So for her, there was no, I don't have a problem. There's no problem. I'm getting to the doctor. I'm doing all the stuff.
Good language for it.
Yeah. Right. I notice you've been driving a little less. How's it going with drives to the doctor's office? Yeah. But again, it really, how the parent responds with all of those questions too, is really the thing. I mean, because they can,
I think the hygiene one is a trigger too. But again, if we had this conversation earlier, I've already decided, and I'm being brutally honest about this. If I can't clean myself, I'm getting help. And I'm deadly serious. I'm not making a joke about it. I'm not making light of it, because again, we went through this and it's not funny when it's happening. Right. It's just not funny. If I can't clean myself, I can't keep myself clean, right?
Yeah.
I'm getting help.
Yeah.
That's it. And I've made up my mind about that. And hopefully too, let's kind of wrap things up on a positive sense, that one of the cool things that when you were doing all the research for assisted living for your mom, we actually visited 2 or 3 places. Yeah. I got to tell you, these places were gorgeous.
Oh my God.
This isn't Shady Acres anymore.
No, the place
I would have moved in that day.
Right. The place I'm hoping my mom actually makes the transition to soon is stunningly beautiful.
No, they're not all like that.
No.
More and more are, because it's a growing
well, and
industry.
also because people our age are starting to think about that. We're starting to think about active adult retirement communities, and then the shift into assisted living when we need that level of care, all of that. And that's, again, something that you can navigate with long-term care insurance and that stuff at our age, which I think people our age are starting to think a lot more about those things. So I mean, the assisted living communities now have changed quite a bit. They're much more social. They're much more cultural. It's like, my godmother said, she said, I'm not going to a place where I'm going to have to play bingo, and
Margaritaville.
yeah, right. And but they're not there's places that aren't like that anymore. They
Yeah,
go,
Margaritaville.
yeah.
We've got rock concerts and,
Well, that's more for
athletics.
people our age. But I'm saying,
No,
that
no. It's right.
yeah, but the place I'm looking at for my mom has an organic garden, with the chef that makes fabulous food, and they do trips to the city, and they have, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not like it was when assisted living was not a thing. I mean, they're popping up everywhere. Because we're getting older, our age group is getting older.
Mhm.
So it's really been huge advances in that kind of option. So
Well, that's a good place to wrap it, because again, we're going to cover all those things, and hopefully, please invite your friends if anybody's
Yeah.
dealing with this.
And send us suggestions for topics too. We really want to know what you're dealing with and what your concerns are, and where you need help, and how we can help.
So we're going to try to pull up a family, I think about every 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
And these will be open to everybody, and it'll be kind of the gateway into the deeper program. So,
Right.
yeah. Well, listen, thanks a lot, everybody, for joining in. We had Spencer and Jeff and Lou and Jennifer
was amazing. Amazing. Yeah. And
thanks.
we're gonna have again the links to everything that we brought up today at the big60life.blog.
And if you're watching on the replay, of course, they'll be in the
they'll be in the
description
comment stream
below
afterwards too. Yeah.
as well. Anything else we need to add?
I don't think so.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being with me
Thanks
today.
for joining us in the family room, and we'll see you again soon.